So I'm here with Didier. Didier is the nominated head coach for the team Melbourne Strength Culture that are competing up at the up-and-coming TSF Team Champs in March. Didier, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, JP. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And thanks for being here. So the Team Champs are coming up. We're less than 2 months away. And so I'm excited to be speaking to a number of the coaches in the lead up to kind of get their insights and to ask them a few questions and to probe a little bit and to hopefully, find out a little bit more what it takes to bring a team to the Team Champs, because Melbourne Strength Culture are actually a very experienced team at the Team Champs. I don't think they've missed an event, including our end of year challenge, which was our kind of precursor to the Team Champs in 2017. Is that right, Dids? Have you been at every event that we've run there?
That's right. And I'm pretty sure I lifted at the 2017 one. That was like my second comp or
Okay,
something. And then, yeah, I think we've been at everyone in some capacity. Yeah.
excellent. Okay, well, obviously, Melbourne Strength Culture and us at TSF, we've got a very good relation. So I'm very excited to have you guys over at our, the biggest comp that we're going to be running, I guess, in our history after over 20 comps. Now, the nominations came out last week, and the first thing that called out my attention when I saw the nominations for Melbourne Strength Culture was the fact that you got an all-girls team. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about who you've got lifting and yeah, who they are and what their background is?
Yeah, yeah. So with the all girls team, I think the first thing that I'll say is that like some people might think like we've gone out of our way to just make an all girls team, which is fine if that's what someone wants to do. But it just comes down to all four of the lifters are weapons. We wanted to put strong people in, and they're the strong people. So that's just how the cookie crumbles. So yeah, we have Natasha in the under 48s, Lina Tran in the under 56s, Dusa in the under 60s, and then Abbey Stronnel in the under 67.5s. So yeah, very very happy with the team we're able to bring this year.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not like a conscious thing where we want, more women representation. It just happens to be that the best lifters that you've got happen to be these four absolute weapons. So that's awesome.
Pretty much, yeah. Because like even last year we had I think it was three women and one male, but it just yeah we picked strong lifters and that's kind of yeah how it worked out. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of the other clubs that are competing, so I'm thinking of things like the Crundle Crew, Victor Lou is his Lou lift. A lot of these people are individual coaches, so they're just like an individual coach that maybe run sessions at a gym, or they're an
Yep.
online coach or whatever. Whereas Melbourne Strength Culture is unique, well, not necessarily unique, I suppose, but it's in a different category, kind of like us at the Strength Fortress. You've got multiple coaches, you've got dozens, if not hundreds, of members and lifters. How does a team, or how does a club like Melbourne Strength Culture, what does it kind of look like for you guys? You've got, yeah, if I'm not wrong, four coaches there. What does it look like for you guys in terms of how you guys choose
Sorry, mate. I might
who
have
you have
to repeat
representing the
that. I
club?
think I'm yeah yeah. So to be honest, probably the last 2 years it's mainly been my decision because I think I'm the one who pays the most attention to powerlifting and cares the most about team champ. So as soon as it's rolling up, I'm like, all right, bang, bang, bang. This is who's doing it. I just try and scout people early, try and work out who's keen, who would be a good option. So yeah, it's not like I'm just picking my lifters. This year I have three of them as my lifters, but last year we actually had lifters from I think all like three of the coaches. Just because yeah, that's how it worked out. So yeah, this is how it worked out this year, but it's just a case of trying to assemble a good team, and whoever they come from is who they come from.
Excellent. So it's very much a case of, I feel like, I guess let me put it to you this way. Do you think that clubs that are multi-coach clubs, so people like, yeah, you guys, the Strength Fortress, JPS, for example, where they have, I guess, a bigger pool, do you think these clubs have an advantage over like these single coach entities where they've got a bigger pool of lifters to choose from?
Yeah, I think so because it's like anything. It's a numbers game. There's probably just a higher likelihood that a larger, I guess, club can yeah pull from more lifters. So I guess that's something we've got up our sleeve.
Now, another phenomenon that I've noticed in a number of the other nominations are that there are a number of teams and clubs who have put their own coaches or selves into the team. So, for example, at JPS, Jacob's competing for Team JPS. In the Crundle crew, Matt Crundle is actually competing for the Crundle crew himself. What do you think of coaches who nominate themselves as part of their team as opposed to nominating the lifters that they actually coach? Is that something that you think is almost kind of like unfair or like an unwritten rule? Like, it's obviously not against the rules, but like, what are your thoughts and feelings on self-coaching your way into a team champs?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that. If I thought I had a chance of winning or podiuming or just being one of our best four lifters, I'd put myself in. And I think some people might. I know you've definitely coached and competed at the same time in
Yeah,
comps, and some
I'm one of
people
those
might
people.
disagree with that. But I don't necessarily. That's it. Oh, are you doing this one, or I'm not sure. Is that
No,
is
not
that
this one, no. But
top
I have in the
secret?
past.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. You may just, I think with this comp, with the rules, you might not be able to bring another coach. But I think generally speaking, you just need to have another coach or handler there. Like just recently at the comp in Hobart, I kind of coached and competed at the same time, but obviously I had someone there with me, one of my other lifters to help handle and stuff like that. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think. Uh, it's doable. It's obviously more challenging for the coach to have to lift and compete at the same time. But I think it's fun, and I think it kind of builds that camaraderie with the coach also being a lifter and kind of being part of the team. I think there's nothing wrong with it at all.
Do you think, though, it takes away an opportunity from one of the lifters in the club to, I mean, I don't want to talk up what the level of the event is, although, of course, I have a strong bias to thinking it is
No,
one
no,
of the premier events. But do you think it takes away that spot from someone that
yeah,
might want that opportunity?
yeah. I think so, but I think with this comp in particular, just because of the nature of it, I think the number one priority is the team winning. So if the team wins via the strongest lifter getting in and the strongest lifter happens to be a coach, then I don't see that as a problem because already the way the selection works isn't fair. It's trying. I mean, it is fair, but like it's not inclusive. Not everyone gets a spot. Generally speaking, it's going to be your strongest lifters who are keen / available are going to do it. So yeah, I don't really see it as a problem. Everyone knows that not everyone's just going to get into this comp, so that's just how it is. Really, I don't see that as a problem. I mean, I think hypothetically, if like say for us, if it just so happened that all four of us sent four coaches, if we all did it, that might be a bit different. It's like, oh, you literally don't have any of your lifters in it. But I think like one is not really a big
Sure.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty sensible take, to be honest. Now, you said something in there which I find interesting. You said the number one priority is that the team has the best result that they have, that the team wins. Now, I want to take you back to 2019 team champs and ask you
And I
about an
think even
incident that.
sorry, just
Oh, go on.
like quickly.
Finish on your point. Yeah.
So I was just going to quickly say, yeah, I was just going to quickly say because like I feel like just for some of our lifters who may never even do team champs or even want to do team champs, for them, if they're just like a member of our gym really like love what we do, love being part of the culture. For them, they even if they know they'll never get to team champs, they would just enjoy seeing the team do well, even if they're not a part of it. Like if strength culture does well at team champs, that's like a point of pride for them. So I think that's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah, I like that, and I think like that's the culture that I'm trying to go for, right? Is I'm trying to get where we want to have members of these various clubs to have pride for the clubs with which they train at, and for the coaches for whom under they train, and their training partners, and that's kind of like the culture that we're going for. So yeah, really good answer there. I like that. Now, yeah, going back to what I was saying, I wanted
Yeah,
to ask you about an incident in 2019. You kind of said that the biggest priority is that the team wins. Now, in 2019, Melbourne Strength Culture were in a very strong position. I think you guys were fourth at this point, or third perhaps.
I know what you're gonna
And
say. Yeah,
I'm just going to explain it because people might not know. Jason Supers was tied with Sam
yeah,
Skeptis
no,
on
yeah,
total,
for sure, for sure, for
and
sure.
and he needed to increase
Yeah,
his total by 2.5 kilos. So he needed to jump his deadlift by 2.5 kilos, which would have been an easy attempt, I believe, like based on his second attempt. Instead, decided to jump 15 kilos for personal glory, is what I was told afterwards. Ended up failing, ended up costing the team a place on the podium. I think you guys finished fourth instead of third, or maybe even second, something like this. What do you think about that incident? And maybe, I guess your opinions might have changed since then, or maybe your feelings might have changed since then, or I guess maybe the meaning of the comp has changed also in that time.
I think the meaning of the comp has changed a bit more, and I think with more years, there's more weight to getting a podium. If I was in the driver's seat now, I wouldn't do that. But I wasn't in the driver's seat. I actually was handling on the day, but I'd been working in strength culture for like less than a year then, and it was more so a case of like, all right, I'm here to kind of like run it, but I'm not necessarily calling all the shots. Like with Jason, for example, I was just like looking at Jamie and be like, all right, what attempt are we doing? So that was Jamie's call, which is fine. That's what he wanted to do. But yeah, this year I would be trying to get on the podium if that was the option.
Right. I think like back then, even the podium prizes were quite insignificant, whereas now there's a bit more prize money on the line. There's a little bit more glory on the line.
For
So
sure, that's probably a factor too. Yeah, yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Now,
yeah, for sure, for sure.
one discussion that we've had recently, Didi and you and I have been exchanging a few messages since the announcement of what I've called the bracket system. We've got a Premier bracket and we have a Challengers bracket. And so just to quickly explain that for those that might not be paying attention, we've got 22 teams. They're going to be split across 2 days. So 11 teams compete on day one, the Challengers bracket. 11 teams compete on day two, the Premier bracket. And in order to qualify into the Premier bracket for the year following, you have to have good enough results in the year prior. And so for me, this kind of acts like a Premier League and a League Two, I suppose, where teams get promoted and relegated between the two leagues, I suppose, or between the two brackets. And I've tried to come up with a system that rewards teams on day one, the Challengers bracket, for competing well, for scoring well, and for finishing in the top four. They get promoted the following year. And similarly, in the Premier bracket, for teams that underperform, they will be relegated into the Challengers bracket. What were your initial thoughts? Do you want to explain to us a little bit about what your initial thoughts were, what might be a potential improvement or flaws in this system, or maybe you like the system in general and what we're trying to achieve here?
Cool. I think you cut out a little bit there, but I think I have the general gist of what you were saying. So initially I was like, I'll be completely honest. Initially I was like, oh, this looks really cool. This is like an extra element, like makes it a bit more, I guess, high stakes. Not that long after, I kind of had some reservations, and we chatted about them, and obviously we can chat about them again. My main kind of, I think, initial issue was, and this is obviously just my perspective, but I didn't like the potential, and I assume this will be happening in some way, shape, or form, of like weight classes being separated across 2 days. And because I'm pretty sure, so we're in the Premier, which means we're lifting on the second day. And so obviously that is an advantage to us. And it means that, like, let's just say Abbey, there could be a 67 who's really strong, who lifts on the first day. They total, let's say, 400. So we can just rock up on day two and know, all right, load 402, win. Or if it's tied, if we have body weight, load 400, win. And as much as that is an advantage, it rewards the teams who've been there for other years. My preference is head to head. And if there's two really strong lifters, let's get them together. So that was probably my main kind of like reservation with it. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why you've come to this decision, and there's a lot of things to factor in. But that was probably my main, I guess, issue. That I didn't want to see weight classes split up, because I think just putting strong lifters head to head in tight battles is what it's all about. Yeah, and it's still a battle. It's not like they're not against each other. It's just they're not against each other in real time, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid, I suppose, flaw. And the hard thing when it comes to creating systems, decision making, is weighing up what pros and cons that there might potentially be. So, for example, the downside and the reverse, right? Let's say you put all the lifters in the same sessions, which would be the traditional way of doing things. You'd end up having a system where the final session, so session 4, because we're going to have 4 sessions, so the final session on day 2 ends up being overly weighted in its significance, because every battle in that will determine every placing throughout the whole day. And ironically, if you put more of your lifters into those heavier weight classes, assuming you run it in the traditional order of heavyweights, lightweights to heavyweights, then they get a better opportunity. In a similar way, like you've just described, you get a better chance to out jostle other teams on this team scoring. So it is a very delicate thing to find a balance for. I think the biggest, not the biggest, but from my point of view, the way that what you've just described kind of gets handled is that inevitably the better lifters will be on day 2 anyway. Like, of course, there'll be some outliers. There are some very strong lifters already nominated for day 1. But I think by overall, the better and stronger lifters will be on day 2 anyway, because they're part of the better teams. And so, yeah, there'll be some cases where that's the case, like you've just described, where you'll be able to out-total lifter from the day before. But I think the overall element the overall feeling will be, once day 2 arrives, it's going to be like this really, hopefully, prestigious day where people feel really, feel a lot of pressure and feel a lot of weight on what this means on that particular day. So I guess that's what we're kind of going for. And there's definitely going to be flaws no matter what.
Yeah, for sure. That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Now, you kind of mentioned Abbey. I wanted to ask you a little bit of a question about Abbey, and I wanted to clear the air on a misunderstanding I guess, an error that kind of took place last year. So, for those that remember, Abbey Stronnel was in a tight battle with Edwina. Edwina was lifting thrust, and Edwina failed her last deadlift, and I think Abbey had her third deadlift in at 175, and it was a late change down to 172.5, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was 172 down to 170. And there was a bit of a kerfuffle because that was an illegal attempt change. I just wanted to ask you what
Yeah,
kind of happened there,
yeah,
if that was something that you were aware of, was that just an error on your end that you didn't realize? Or, yeah, I wanted to hear your perspective because actually I haven't even asked you about
yeah,
that at all.
yeah. So it was an error on my part. My call technically wasn't in line with the rules. I can sit here and say that it was an honest mistake. You may or may not believe that, and that's fine. But yeah, it wasn't like, look, I do like, I guess I like rules. I think rules make for good sport. So had I known that what I was doing was going to be an illegal move, I mean, I did know. I think just in the moment, it was just one of those things that I just didn't consider. I just thought, all right, what's the number we need? Put it in. They took it. Had it not be, had I realised that, I wouldn't have put it in. But it just so happened that they missed it, and then we got the win. I will say, just to be a little bit less diplomatic, I think Abbey could have pulled 2.5 more. So I think at the end of the day, we were going to be all right. But I do see how, like, it technically wasn't an attempt that should be put in.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I firstly agree that I think Abbey could have done the 2.5 more anyway, so it's not the end of the world in that sense. I find it interesting because a lot of rules come with them, I suppose, how do you describe, like consequences or punishments. So if you break a rule, you get a punishment or a fine or something like that. If you don't hit depth, you get a red light. In this instance, let's say you knew, and I believe you, don't get me wrong, but let's say you knew that what you were doing
Yeah,
was like not allowed. Like you said, like if I knew that wasn't allowed, I wouldn't have put it in.
yeah,
But ironically,
yeah,
by not knowing,
yeah.
you've actually like stumbled your way into a better result. And so I can't help but wonder what's to stop
It's true, and
a
I
coach
can.
from putting in a fake attempt and being like, well, if they take it, great, and if they don't take it, well, that was going to happen anyway. And this isn't a question at you. This is a question, I guess, in the broad, at large, in a broader scale, like in a powerlifting sense, like when coaches make these types of, I guess, like how do you like prevent or punish these types of mistakes, which are essentially unpunishable at the moment?
For sure, for sure. Like, I can definitely see some people taking advantage of that, and if they want to, that's fine. Honestly, I wouldn't. Like, I just, as I said, I do as much as I did. I literally did it, but like, I wouldn't intentionally go out of my way to do it because I like rules and I like that there's a way that things need to be done. Um, I don't know if like punishing is the right way, but I feel like it's just tough because I think it comes down to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think you know just the
Hmm.
rules and how things run a bit better than me, but I think it comes down to the tech desk knowing like what the attempts have to be and stuff like that, and just kind of knowing the general rules. Like at our local comps, even if we have someone doing the tech desk, I've started like sitting there just so if any like of those kind of queries come up, I kind of know most things. So I can kind of like if people ask, one of our volunteers a question, I can be like, okay, this is why you can't do this, you can't do that. So I think that's the kind of the fix. Like the tech desk needs to kind of know this attempt, but it is challenging because obviously it's not always going to be someone who's completely over the rules. Sometimes the coaches don't even know all the rules. I'm a good example of that. So, yeah, I think, but I do see it as something that could be taken advantage if people are sneaky.
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree with you. Like, the tech desk, the referees need to know the rules. But I mean, at this comp, at 2023 team champs, you made a mistake. 4 referees didn't notice. There was a technical controller didn't notice. The whole tech table didn't notice. It's like it's clearly gone over the head of everybody in the room. And so,
Yeah,
and I mean, the other part of that is like, if
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no, I
yeah,
suppose, consequence or punishment, then it's like a free pass, right? Like, even if you know the rules, you can be like I said, you can just like throw it out there, have a go, and um, if you get caught out, then it's like no. If there's no consequence, it's like no big deal. It's going to happen anyway. So I do feel like that's like a small loophole, right? There's like little loopholes, little gaps in the rules that you can kind of sneak by, and this is a very like uh, narrow point, like a very rare thing that's happened. But I just found that like really interesting.
for sure, for sure. And I think in a similar way, it might be like kind of gauging that the refs aren't really paying that much attention to depth and then squatting a little bit high. Like if you know that you've seen people, or you did an attempt, you felt like it wasn't that deep and you got whites, you can probably know, all right, I can really push this one on the borderline and get away with it. So it's just one of those things I get. I guess that's a little bit different to just like purposely putting an attempt, but it's in a similar type of vein of just noticing fucking these ways to bend the rules a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're a sports fan, right? That's just what sports is like. I feel like maybe a good example of what you just described about the depth thing is, let's say your second attempt bench was just like RP 10 and 0.5, and you know that you've got no hope of getting the next attempt, the third attempt, like the 2.5, but maybe you go for it anyway, and you've noticed the referees are giving quick press calls, and you just try to jump the call, with your fingers crossed that if you get away with it, you get away with it, and if you don't, well, too bad. You're going to fail
Yeah.
anyway. So it's like one of those things where you kind of got to toe the line a little bit.
For sure.
like
I think that's
if you've
something
got
that
nothing
people
to
do.
lose-
People obviously definitely do that.
Yeah. That's sports. That's how sports works, right? Like you do everything in your power to get the best result you can.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the difference is, it's basically the same thing though, because if you don't pause your bench long enough, you're relying on the ref essentially not making the right decision. So hypothetically, if I knew what I was doing with that attempt, I'm relying on no one noticing. So it kind of is the same thing, really.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going for. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the actual comp that's coming up and the lifters that you've had. You said Natasha, Lina, Constance, and Abbey, of course. I wanted to ask, last year, Lou Lift, they scored 22 points. 23 points out of possible 25. So there's 24 points on offer, plus an extra point for offering a volunteer. What do you see as being, with a much deeper field? Last year we had 13 teams. This year we've expanded out to the 2 days. We have 22 teams. What do you see as being the winning number? Like, how many points is a team going to need to score? Is it going to be more than last year because it's more competitive? Or will the teams end up sharing more of the points and it'll actually be a lower scoring kind of affair per team? What do you kind of foresee in that sense?
My gut reaction would be like it's six is winning a class.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. And last year, Victor Lou's team had 3 wins and a second place. So they scored 22 points plus
So my gut
bonus
reaction
point for a
is
volunteer.
Yeah. Even last year, going into last year, I probably would have said you'll have to win most classes. But I think this year, my gut reaction is you're probably going to have to get all 4 to win. Especially because there are some, like for example, we get the automatic, as long as Natasha makes an attempt of everyone, we come in with a first. And there's probably some other weight classes where maybe it's not like a literal guaranteed win, but just because of the lifter in that class, it's like, okay, the chances are that they've already got that 6 points kind of there ready to go. So yeah, my assumption would be that's probably going to be the way to go about it. Just win everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually kind of help it feel a little bit the reverse. I feel like you can get away with dropping a few points and still winning simply because it's so much deeper. It's hard to say. Like it's hard to run the numbers. Like maybe you have to put that through a computer model and run it 1,000 times. But I can't help but feel that to win all 4 classes would almost just be too hard. Whereas last year with fewer teams, yeah, you can win all 4 because there's just not many lifters. But I mean, you referenced earlier, I think you referenced Abbey and saying, if there's a really strong lifter on the day one, they're not going to be competing with her. There's 13 lifters in that class. Like to win that class is going to be so freaking hard. And so I guess like my next question is, which of those classes, like you mentioned Natasha, she's a walkover, she's on her own. That's not to say that she doesn't want to put her best foot forward because one of the tiebreakers is actually overall dots or average dots. But yeah, who do you see as being some of the more challenging classes you've got to coach? I mean, like Constance is in a class of 10, I believe. Abby's in a class of 13. I know that Lina's in a smaller class, but there's a lifter Twee from Sim Strength who's a really, really talented lifter and competed at an IPF Worlds recently. How do you foresee, I guess, those classes going and the results, and what are you guys aiming for in each of those categories?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the challenging ones, it would definitely have to be the 60s and the 67s, just because of how deep they are and how close it'll be. I think with Lina's had a really good run of training, but it really just comes down to, like it always, how strong the other lifter is. And I know Twee is very, very strong. So if she comes in with similar numbers she's been able to do before, I think she's got it. So in that case, it wouldn't really be a challenging class. If the gap's just not there, then Lina can just try having a kind of perfect day, hit PBs, secure second. And I think if I don't think anyone else will take second. So that wouldn't really be a challenging class per se. Maybe if Twee slips up, misses some lifts, Lina has a really good day, then it maybe becomes a bit challenging because it's more of a head-to-head. But obviously, a head-to-head is nowhere near as challenging as like a 6v6 or something like that, or more. Like Abbey's class at Nationals was the same class, like some of the similar lifters, the 67s. It was just nuts. Like I think like 1 through 5 was super tight. I imagine it's going to be a similar situation again. So it's got to be those ones because it's a case of you're not just worrying about, oh, am I getting first? But if I miss this, do I drop off the podium? And so there's going to be a lot of important decision making, and then obviously pressure on the lifter to make lifts, because if they can make lifts, then obviously it puts himself in the best spot to win. So those would definitely have to be the tougher ones.
Right, and I think like an interesting thing is because the points that you earn per category are constant, there is, one of the things that I kind of actually like about the way that the system that Team Champs runs is that some of the classes are incentivized, or some of the teams, you're actually incentivized to go into emptier classes. So, looking at the fact that there's 13 lifters in the 67.5s, yet only 5, I think, or 4 in the 75s, is there a temptation to put Abbey into the 75 so she has an emptier field and is more likely to finish on top of that podium? Or is the strategy rather to stay in the 67.5 and actually try to displace some of the other lifters and actually take points off potential competitors?
Well, yeah, I think honestly that hasn't been a thought. I can see that being a thought. I think Abbey won it last year. She's kind of wants to do it again. She's going against lifters she's going to get against. I think she just enjoys competing against the 67s. But I can see how that could be a strategy. And to be honest, we haven't really paid much attention to the 75s. But I think if there was a chance that, the 75s would be an easier win, I wouldn't be opposed to it. If that was going to be an option. But I do think that's more my point of view. I'm not going to speak for Abbey. I think she wants to go against the 67s. Like she likes a challenge. Like for example, she doesn't compete as a junior, even though as a junior. She would have won it twice already, but she wants to go against the Opens because she wants a challenge. So I think if it was her talking, she'd say, nah, let me go against the 67s. Let me beat them all again. But I can see that being a potential strategy. And obviously, like with Natasha, we've put her in the 48s, and people would assume that we've done that specifically to just get the points, but the reality is, just like with male female, we've picked strong lifters, and that's just where they've ended up. But yeah, I can see people potentially doing that and going to different classes to win some points. But then, of course, if you do that, you then don't get the chance to steal points against other people. I haven't thought into it that deep, to be honest. I've just kind of been like, all right, these are our lifters, these are your weight classes, let's go at it. But that could be a strategy for sure.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like that meta strategy, or that that pre-competition day strategy will become increasingly important over the next few years, especially as Team Champs continues to grow, more prize money gets put on the line. Like those decisions start to become more and more important, and those considerations will start to make a bigger difference. Look, thank you so much for your time, Dids. We're going to call it there because we've gone a little bit over time already.
For sure.
I want to say a big thanks for coming on, giving us some of your thoughts and insights into the day, answering some of my tough questions. And yeah, we're super excited to have you and the Melbourne Strength Culture boys and girls back at Team Champs this year.
Thanks for having me, JP. That was really fun.